Hello, ladies and gentlemen. This is directed specifically at the people and the businesses in Sevier County, along with the Sevier County government, but it is not exclusive to it. This is where I live today. This is what I see when I go out for a hike. Some of you probably know where this is. Maybe some of you don't. I have plenty of pictures of LeConte Lodge as well, and the trails around there. Was at Charles Bunyan just last Saturday with my daughter, a trail that should have been crowded to the gills and yet is not. And I want to give you a few bona fides here before I start for one reason above everything else. Everything I'm going to show you in this video is fact. It is documented fact, and I'm going to present all my sources. I'm not going to make anything up. I'm not going to ask you to take anything on faith. In fact, you shouldn't take it on faith, just as you shouldn't allow Mayor Larry Waters and the CDC and Governor Bill Lee and the Tennessee Department of Health, you shouldn't allow them to give you anything on faith either. They should not be allowed. No one in authority ever, no one in the media ever should be able to make a statement to you without being able to put forward the facts behind which it rests. Let me give you just one example. We've all heard that supposedly global warming is causing the sea level to rise and we're all going to drown, right? We've all heard this. Well, this is a picture of the dock at the home that I owned until the 30th of April of this year. It was taken just a couple of years ago. I built this dock after I bought the house. I'm going to point to you right here to the cross members that go across at the bottom. Remember, Al Gore told us, along with all the other climate modelers, that the sea level was going to rise by 5 feet by 2100. I built this dock in 2000. This picture was taken just a couple of years ago, so about 1/5 of the way. And when it was built, those cross members and those bolts were in exactly the same place that they are now. That level off the water is about 4 or 5 inches, and that's about where it normally would be. The tidal range in this area is 1 foot, ladies and gentlemen, about 1 foot. It's the Florida Gulf Coast. Water, as you know, is a self-leveling thing. If you take 2 buckets, put a hose between them, fill one up, they'll both have the same level of water. Therefore, we should have had about a 1 foot rise in the water level in the 20 years that I lived there and from the time I built this dock. This dock was built with pilocks. This is after, by the way, Hurricane Ivan. It's the only one that was left standing. Did not move a millimeter. Why is not the water right here over the top of these boards? The reason is because the water level hasn't gone up. And you say, well, but New Orleans has a higher level. Well, guess what? If the water level has not gone up in one place and has another, the water has not gone up. The ground has sunk. I think that's pretty obvious, right? All right, so just to show you that I do not play games with people when it comes to things like this. I don't do it when it comes to facts in this regard either. Here is the city of Sevierville. Today, Sevier County Mayor Larry Waters signed Executive Order 34. This is from last night. With support from city leaders requiring face coverings in certain circumstances through September 30th, it extends Executive Order 23, which mandated face coverings beginning July 10th. The order is a severe covering. What he said, I am extending the mask mandate for the health and safety of the residents, employees, and visitors of Sevier County. I've spoken to city leaders, the state health department, healthcare providers, local businesses, and tourism officials about the mandate, and they agree with the extension of this temporary order. Really, Larry? They do? Do they? Do business leaders, local businesses, they all agree with this? Do they agree with the fact that we have all of these hotels that are available for $50 a night in the middle of the county and in Gatlinburg, and that the trails and areas around here are basically a ghost town in the middle of summer? We'll get to this last paragraph in a minute. Between July 24th, 2 weeks after the mandate, and August 20th, the 7-day case rate has decreased by 70%, the 7-day positive rate by more than 11%, and the 7-day average daily hospitalization rate fell by half. Well, these are all true statements. However, they're false and misleading in a number of ways, and I will get to how. You know, we've been told that COVID-19 is a horrible, horrible thing, and it's killing people left and right. And clearly, if you look at the statistics on a national basis, there's 170,000 dead people. That's a lot. But look, right down here, from the State Health Department, there are 2,211 confirmed and probable cases, 1,710 recoveries, 490 active cases, 79 hospitalizations, and most importantly, because this is what matters to you, right? 11 deaths. Well, 11 dead people is very sad. I'm sorry that all 11 of them are dead. I'm sure that their families are very sorry and very unhappy about it too. But folks, is there an emergency? Remember, this mandate here is because it is to protect the health and safety of Sevier County residents. By the way, nearly all of these 11 people died prior to the mandate going into effect. This has been going on now for about 6 months, right? I mean, this is where we are. It's now the end of August. This started in February. Really got going in March. So it's been about 6 months. So that's about half a year. So why don't we double that number? That would be 12 months, right? That'd be 22 deaths. 20 deaths. Let's just call it 20. 20 is a nice round number. It's easy to work with. How many people do you think die in Sevier County in a year prematurely? In other words, before you'd expect them to do so naturally. Well, guess what? The Federal Reserve actually maintains this kind of data. It's kind of weird, you think about it. I mean, life insurance people do this all the time because that's how they compute your premiums. But in Sevier County, Tennessee, about 450 people a year expire prematurely. That is, before they reach 77 years of age. Now, don't ask me why the Federal Reserve considers 77 to be a magic number, but they do. And you say, well, wait a minute now. We've got 11? And we are all wearing diapers on our face when every single year, before people would be expected to die, 450 of them meet their demise in this county. We have 100,000 residents approximately in this county, which, by the way, makes this really easy because this rate is per 100,000, and we have about 100,000 people live here. So you don't have to do any multiplication or division or math or nothing complicated. Just look at the number. There it is. And for 2018, it was 449. By the way, what was it the year before that? 440. Okay, so, the 11 that we've had, well, gee, it doesn't even account for this, does it? No, not really. From 2015, we had 415, and if you add 20 to that, it'd be about 435, which means that whatever changed here, right, from 2015 to 2018, in terms of additional deaths per year, COVID is on a scale with that. But were we wearing masks? Were we pulling our hair out? Were we screaming and yelling and playing Ree and Karen all over that? No, we weren't. No, we weren't. And folks, it gets better. The Tennessee Department of Health produces a table that tells you what kills people, leading causes of death. Now, remember, if we were to take this 6-month rate and we would double it, it would be about 20, right? Because we've had 11 people that have died. So it'd be about 20 people that died. So let's go down the list. All right, we have 4,200 people. And remember, we're going to divide this by 4 because this is 4 years, 14, 15, 16, 17, right? So that's about 1,100, 1,000-ish. We'll call it 1,000. We'll make it nice and easy. 1,000 people total every year die in Sevier County, approximately, of residents. And this is residents, okay? This is not people, the tourists. This is residents. So, if you're a motorcyclist and you wreck your motorcycle and you're a tourist, you don't actually live here. You don't count. You're a motorcyclist and you do live here and you wreck your motorcycle, you do count. I mean, you'd count somebody else's place, but you don't count here. About 975, so about 250 people a year die of diseases of the heart. That's, for the most part, heart attacks. 250. Remember now, that's 10 times as many, folks, as people who die of COVID so far. Okay, and this is taking that 11 and doubling it because it's been about 6 months. So you're 10 times more likely to die of a heart attack. You're about 10 times as likely to die of a cancer. You're getting where I'm going with this yet? All right. 284. Well, 4. So what is that? So about 4 times as likely to die of COPD, probably because you smoked, and about the same likeliness to die of an accident. Now remember, COVID is, it's a disease, right? You get it from other people. So it's not really your fault, right? Well, guess what? A car accident isn't your fault either. But according to this data, you are 4 times as likely to die in a car wreck. Well, we're not banning cars, are we? Well, we're not banning cars. Cerebrovascular disease, well, those strokes. Well, that's about 3 or 4 times as likely. Alzheimer's, pneumonia, and influenza. Wait just a minute here. Pneumonia and influenza. Now, there is a comparable disease. It happens every year, right? People get influenza, and it causes pneumonia, and it kills about 25 people a year. In other words, it kills about as many people a year, and it's a communicable disease as we would expect COVID to kill, assuming that COVID kills another 11 between now and the end of the year. Probably won't, because we're 11 at this point, and we're at suppression, which I'll get to in a minute. Well, this is a 4-year running period, folks, from 2014 to 2017, before everything became politicized around a virus, because we have to play political games and we can't look at science. This is science. These are statistical facts. For the last 10 years, 20 years, 50 years, have you been told you had to wear a mask? Have you been told that bars and businesses and shops and grocery stores, you had to wear a mask? You had to wear a mask to get your hair cut. You couldn't go get your teeth cleaned. You couldn't take your cat into the vet. They had to come get your cat to give him his rabies shot, which I just went through, which, by the way, is completely stupid because cats can both transmit and harbor coronaviruses. Not only that, there's a coronavirus that actually kills cats. And yet, when you look at the data right here, it is actually more likely, not by a lot, in the same realm, that pneumonia and influenza will kill you as COVID. This is not my data, folks. This is from the Tennessee Department of Health. In that same range of potential risk is suicide and chronic liver disease and cirrhosis. And we know how you get chronic liver disease and cirrhosis for the most part, right? It's hitting a bottle a little too hard. Suicide, of course, is, it's mostly depression related. Having your human interaction tampered with wouldn't tend to raise that possibility now, would it? Oh, wait, it would. How about being out of job? No work. What do you think happens when we take all the lower class, lower working jobs? And, you can say, well, that's classist. No, it's just fact, folks. If you got a median income, half the people are below the median, half are above. So what do you do when what do you think you do to exacerbate depression, serious depression, when you start tampering with people's ability to earn a living? You don't think this number is likely to go up, do you? Oh, it is? Oh. Well, what if this number goes up this year by more than 20? In Sevier County? So we know what the average is here, this 4-year period of time, right? Divide by 4, there you go, right? So if there's more than 20 more suicides in Sevier County than there were COVID deaths, then every single one of the mitigations that were taken by Larry Waters and all of you people who piled on and believed in it and thought it was a good idea, you caused those 20 suicides. You caused them. You going to take responsibility for that? Probably not. Of course, then we have diabetes, nephritis, which, by the way, has to do with your kidneys, septicemia, which is septic shock essentially caused by some sort of injury or infection that gets into your blood system. And then we go down the list further, okay? But look, the big one here, folks, the 900-pound gorilla in the room is right here. Because we are told that COVID is such a terrible disease. And yet you look at the statistics on a national basis and it looks really bad, 170,000, right? Pneumonia and influenza usually in a normal year kills about 30 or 40. And so the 170 looks really awful. Well, why is the 170 so high? Because in so many parts of this country, including parts of Tennessee, we shoved this disease into nursing homes and we killed people. We have consistently told people who have it, don't do anything. Go home and sit and wait until you can't breathe anymore, which takes 80 to 90% of your pulmonary capacity and destroys it before you go to the hospital. When you get short of breath because your SpO2, that is your blood oxygenation level, starts to fall, you've run out of that excess. Most humans are capable, unless you're an athlete, capable of a maximum metabolic output somewhere between 8 and 10 mets. 1 met is you sitting here quietly or recording a podcast like I'm doing right now. 8 or 10 is about where most ordinary slovenly Americans happen to be, and that's a huge percentage of Americans. If you're an athlete, it's much higher. Mine is considerably higher because I'm a runner. So maybe my maximum mets output could be as high as 18, and I'm not 20 anymore either. But point being that the advice, if you get COVID-19, is go sit at home until 80 to 90% of your pulmonary capacity, your ability to respire oxygen and get rid of carbon dioxide, to do those things is destroyed, and then go to the hospital, which is totally stupid because we know that there are multiple drugs that may interrupt this process. And I've gone through that in my other podcast. I'm not going to go through it again here because this is aimed at the stupidity of policy on a statistical basis. It's not aimed at your mitigations. And you say, well, how do I know that we're right about this and you know, that you're not just making this up? Well, look, here is the death rate and total deaths for 2018. Now, we don't have 2019, but remember, that other table is 2014 to 2017. This is 2018. In 2018, we had 1,142 deaths in Sevier County, 11.7 per 1,000. Okay, so this is the total number right here, 1,142, which, by the way, is above the statistical average for the United States, which is 0.85. All right, and with 100,000, we'd figure about 800, 850. We're actually considerably above that. We normally run a little higher than normal. Why? Well, I don't know. Maybe we're older, sicker, and fatter. It doesn't really matter. All right, so what was going to happen here? Well, this here, folks, is a news article from January 3rd. And it says that Sevier County is on track for another record-breaking year for tourism. Good for jobs and tax dollars. Last week of 2019 was a good example. And then they start getting into the numbers. Pigeon Forge's gross receipts are up 8% for 2019. The biggest winner was amusements at 15. Well, gee, do you think, how do you think amusements have done this year with COVID? Do you think their revenue is up this year, or do you think it's in the tank? All right. How about Gallenberg? The finance director says revenue is up 15.6%. Been to Gatlinburg in the last couple of months? $50 a night rooms at the hotel of your choice on the Strip during the week? When have you ever seen that except in the middle of February when there's no snow? And then you got the mayor who says, well, but if you just wear a mask because the CDC says so. Well, you know what? Here's a study from 1981. Royal College of Surgeons of England, 1981, volume 63. Back in 1981, we actually did science. This was before everything was politics. Summary, no masks were worn in operating theater for 6 months. There was no increase in the incidence of wound infections. Well, now, wait a minute. Surgeons and other people wearing masks in an operating room is the very definition of source control. You're trying to prevent the person who is operating on you from giving you an infection. So they put together they thought they'd test the hypothesis that Masks actually protect the person who's being operated on. And so with the agreement of this and controls, they decided to do a 1-month experiment in the operating theater in 1980. And they expected that they might get a significant rise in infections. And if they did, they'd terminate the trial early because you don't want to make people sick. That would be bad. But in fact, there was no initial rise in infections. And so the trial was continued for 6 months, from March to August. They took nose and throat swabs so they could try to figure out whether or not the people who had colds or something else going on was transmitting that to the person that was on the table. Here are the results. The throughput, by the way, and oh, by the way, they excluded operations that did not involve incisions, which would probably not give you something because when you're on anesthesia, you have a tube down your throat and, you're being breathed for mechanically. But guess what happened, folks? The rate of infection, look at this here, 1.8%. What was it before? It was 3.7%. 8 infections versus 16, 19, 19, 18. Very consistent here. The number of wounds is consistent. And yet the rate of infections was cut by half. Was this statistically significant? Oh, you bet it was. In fact, a p-value of 0.05 means there was only a 5% chance under statistical analysis that this happened due to some other cause or by chance. This study is 40 years old. There is not a single study that I can find in the literature, and I dare anybody to send it to me, that contravenes this. And in fact, there have been several other attempts to go back at this data and perform an analysis across other studies along with this one in the years since. None of them have found a change in outcomes. It's been taken as faith that if you are operated on, that the surgeon should wear a mask because it would prevent you from getting an infection. But in fact, the data says it's more likely you'll get an infection if he wears one. And you say, well, that's impossible. Well, no, it's not. It is entirely possible to explain. When you put a mask on, instead of the air coming out of your nose and going down harmlessly onto the ground, it gets jetted around the sides of the mask that don't seal. That might bounce off somebody else and into your wound. If you happen to be sitting next to somebody in a restaurant or in a bar or walking on the street, it might do the same thing, wouldn't it? Well, we don't know. But the fact of the matter is that there was no indication that in a sterile theater where you do exactly one thing to change, and by the way, folks, that is the definition of science, okay? Here is the clean facts here on this study. In fact, the theater routine remained unchanged except that no one wore a mask. That is what science is. You take one variable, you modify it, and you see what happens. All these people who claim that there is some kind of grand effect from masks, well, the data doesn't bear it out, does it? And by the way, even if it did, we're back to this, aren't we? There is no excess death that is worse than influenza happening in Sevier County. Why? Because in Sevier County, we're not shoving coronavirus at people it can kill. In other words, in Sevier County, the rate of death from coronavirus per person is the same approximately as the rate of death from the flu. So to those of you that say that it's so much more dangerous than the flu and it's, oh my God, it's terrible, the data says you're wrong. And again, this is not my data. This is the Tennessee Department of Health's data. So let's look at what else we know about the information when it comes to masks. Sevier County, remember Larry Waters says that, but 14 days later, the rate started to fall. Well, actually, not quite. The mask mandate went into effect on the 10th. On the 15th, the rate of infection was falling at the time that he put the mandate into place. He very conveniently omits this. In other words, he lied. This man is a lying psychopath. In fact, 5 days after the order went into effect, the rate of infection rose dramatically and did not actually top on a 7-day rolling average and start to decline until the beginning of August. Why did that happen? Because on August 1st, Sevier County reached 1.7% prevalence of the virus in tests among the population. That's called suppression. But during this entire period of time, and I remind you folks, it takes 5 days for you to become symptomatic if you're infected. So if I give you coronavirus on the 10th, on the day that we have to start wearing masks, you will not become symptomatic until the 15th, on average. Well, there's some room on that. So in a few cases, there have been some cases documented which have been as long as 14 days. But the median is 5. And exactly 5 days after the mandate went into effect, during which time, as you can see from this chart, the rate of infection was falling substantially. In fact, it had fallen by half. As soon as that had the time to take effect, it began to rise, and it doubled. In fact, it more than doubled. It nearly tripled. Now we have reached suppression, and therefore we are down here. And you say to me, well, Mr. Denninger, how do you know that you're right about that? Well, I know because I'm looking at all the rest of the data. Here's part of it. Well, sorry about that. I have asked that the mayor stop the stupid. Why? Because here is the actual data chart that I've been keeping. Got a couple days that are extrapolated, and if you go up a little further, and then we have some other numbers here that I've had to fill in, and that's what the red's for. And up further, there's 2 days where we actually didn't get data from the state, so I had to have those extrapolated as well. But none of those mattered once we got in here. Of course, I didn't know exactly when this was going to be there, but there is this column here called days suppression. This is a calculated formula for when do you reach 2% approximately within the population, and that is our suppression rate. That is where I calibrated it, and I made this prediction a month in advance. And when we got here, you can see here is the 7-day case rate. Moving average went below 1%, and it stayed there since. It is now down to 0.56. The case fatality rate is about 0.5%. And you say, well, that's much worse than the flu, except it isn't, because we know that for coronavirus, for everyone who tests positive, there's about 10 people who never get tested, which means that our case fatality rate is actually lower at this point than that of the flu. The flu is about 0.1. And essentially everybody who gets the flu becomes symptomatic in some form or fashion. That's not the case here. And again, we have 11 total deaths. When was the last one? The 19th of August. So folks, you know, when I look at this data, what I see here is that we've reached a suppression rate, and we reached it exactly as predicted. Had nothing to do with masks. And you say, well, how do you know you're right? Well, I want to go back. I want to show you a couple more things. Here's Blount County. No mandate. No mask mandate. They had a little bit of a peak here in August. They came down a little bit and going back up. Now they're kind of farting around. What is this? This big spike here was from a jail. They had 141 cases, which showed up in one day in their jail. Okay, I think we can safely ignore that, but it does move the 7-day moving average, which, by the way, was headed down. Okay, so this goes into the calculation. But again, look at this rollover here that's happening. Why are we not rolling over hard yet? Because we're at 1.64. What's going to happen here shortly? You're going to see this go down here, and this spike is going to disappear. When we get to right near 2%, that's going to happen. How about Knox County? Remember, Blount and Knox and Sevier were all neighbors. Blount and Knox County put a mask mandate on 7/1. Why? Because they saw this and they said, oh, we need to make you wear a mask. Well, 5 days later, on 7/10, There were probably people looking at this saying, oh, look, it's starting to roll over. It's working, it's working, it's working. How'd it work, folks? Why is it that this happened instead of that? Because they are only at 1.47% positive as of today. That's why. When they get to about 2%, it will roll over and head south and stay that way. Why 2% instead of 1.6 or 1.7? The reason is demographics. This has been consistent in all the other places that I've looked at. It's kind of odd. You wouldn't think so, but it is. It is what it is. So you've got the demographics. Now you say, well, but that's just 2 counties. How do you know you're right? Folks, I have gone through state by state, and I'm just going to quickly review this. And again, all of these rollovers are consistent. Tennessee rolling over as a state. Florida has rolled over hard as a state. Again, you can take all these numbers. This is from the COVID Tracking Project. You can look at the population. You can look at where the rollover happened, and it is extraordinarily consistent. Arizona, South Carolina, Mississippi, Georgia, Texas, Louisiana, which, by the way, originally looked like they might falsify my theory. Right up around here, they were just over 2%. As it turns out, this is where the demographic mix comes in. Louisiana and Georgia, by the way, have very similar demographics. And there you are. Now, Alabama has a very interesting thing going on right here. This is from Tuscaloosa. This is all from the college. Okay, but again, we're leaky tribes. The fact that you reach suppression doesn't mean you can't get more cases, but it does mean this isn't going to go back up. Remember, people who are not symptomatic is good, not bad. North Carolina, not quite there, but getting there, okay? And how do we know that? Well, because there are 162,000 cases and approximately 10.5 million people, so that's 1.6. We're right there in that general area. North Carolina, of course, has a demographic mixture that's fairly similar to South Carolina, and they will roll over shortly. They're in the process of doing it right now. Their hospitalizations, everything. Okay? Arkansas is at 59,583 cases, and they are pushing right up on 2% of the population with that. And guess what? What's happening to their hospitalizations? Look at that. Okay? Now, let's look at a couple of examples that don't fit the mold. Illinois is kind of interesting because they're just starting to get into that general range. But they're not quite there yet. They're at 1.8%. And you notice they've stabilized their hospitalizations, but have their cases started to fall? No. And has this started to fall after the spike that happened earlier on? No. But will it? You betcha. Now, you want to see the bad examples? South Dakota. What's South Dakota? Why is it doing this? Well, you had Sturgis for one thing. But what's the real problem? 12,000 cases, it's just not enough. And then if you want to see the poster child, I saved this one for last because this is actually my most amusing one, and that is Hawaii. Hawaii put a mask mandate in place right in front of the July 4th holiday. Would anybody care to tell me whether or not Hawaii has had any positive impact from having a mask order? Their case rate is currently running approximately 10 times what it was when they instituted the mask order. Not only is their case rate skyrocketing, their hospitalizations are skyrocketing as well. And guess what's going to follow that? Yeah, you can bet on that one. So, folks, and again, the problem here is not whether or not they had a mask order. It's that they only have 7,500 cases, and the state of Hawaii has about 1.3 million people in it. That's the reality, okay? Now, how do you stop death? Well, you stop death by not forcing the bug into people it can kill. But look, in Sevier County, where we've not done this, and I assume we're going to continue to be smart and not do it, this is a disease that is approximately as deadly as the flu. And you're telling me that for something that is as dangerous as the flu, we should force everybody to wear face diapers and destroy the hospitality industry and the ambiance of all of the service industry businesses in the county. That is the bottom line. What Mayor Waters has done and what he claims that the Chambers of Commerce and the Tourism Division and the business owners, everybody else support, is essentially destroying themselves and all of the people who are dependent on those particular industries and places for jobs, and fostering an environment of fear with signs on the side of the road. Let's face it, masks fight COVID-19. Wear them. Really? For a disease that on the numbers, ladies and gentlemen, on the facts, is as dangerous as the flu, for which we have never done this before in any of these 3 years. This is not my information, folks. 104 deaths across 4 years. That's approximately 26 deaths a year. And right here, 11 deaths in Sevier County due to COVID-19. And this has been going on for 6 months. So double it, that's 22. And yet, this year, we would expect, like last year, that 26 people would die of pneumonia and influenza. There is no emergency. There is no reason for anyone to obey, go along with, or allow Mayor Waters to impose and maintain his mask order. The business owners in this county, if you wish to be put out of business and have your enterprises and your profitability damaged or even destroyed by a fear campaign run by a mayor who has all of this information from the Department of Health, and the Department of Health and the governor have it as well, then you're crazy. Ladies and gentlemen, I'm retired. I do not need to work. This is my adopted home. I lived in Northwest Florida for 20 years. Right now, the people in Destin do not have a mask order because the county commission looked at data just like this and voted it down. We here in this county have managed to do what other places have not. We have kept it out of care homes, and the people who are specifically vulnerable, we didn't force it into there, and we have reached suppression. It is time to stop the fear porn. This is a disease that on the facts and on the data is no more dangerous than influenza, which comes around every single year and kills 26 people on average in this county. COVID-19 has killed 11. If you allow this to go on, you, the residents of this county, are at fault for all of the economic damage that accrues. This man must be forced to drop the order today. And if not, he must be run out of office and out of town on a rail. My name's Carl Denninger. I live in Boyd's Creek. I am a local resident. This is my adopted home. And those of you that are being screwed by the insane rantings of a madman who claims to be mayor of our county are my neighbors and my friends. Let's do the right thing.